American Freedom Radio Network proudly presents, live from Phoenix, Arizona, The Truth Denied Talk Radio with host Roxy Lopez. Join us here every Friday from 7 to 9 Central for topics you won't hear on mainstream news, such as chemtrails, GMOs, Morgellons disease, and much more. Humanity is 7 billion strong. We are the majority. If you would like to speak to the host, the call-in number is 218-339-8525. And now, live from the Valley of the Sun, your host, Roxy Lopez.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Truth Denied Talk Radio. I'll be your host today, Roxy Lopez. And boy, it is the Valley of the Sun. I'm not kidding you. It is almost 100 degrees today. Went from 60-something to almost 100 degrees. So I guess we're going to go over 100 this weekend. So we're hitting some record highs. Of course, we're in a drought position as well, so that's no fun. So my guest today, I want to give you a little bit of background. For those who are new to my guest, his name is Sean David Morton. And Sean, when I met Sean, he was investigating Area 51 at the time. This is in the 80s. He filmed it for the first time, and it even ended up on the front page of the LA Times, making the subject a worldwide phenomenon. So that's how my attraction was to Sean David Morton, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And Sean is a writer and a producer, a reporter for Strange Universe, Hard Coffee Sightings. He's appeared on countless shows, Best Kept Secrets being one of them, and of course my favorite show, Ancient Aliens, at this point. And we'll talk a little bit about that hopefully today too. Sean is also dealing with the Great Pleiadian Eclipse alignment, and we are going to definitely delve into that. This happens once every 26,000 years, and there's a celebration that's going to occur at Mount Shasta, and Sean David Morton is a part of that. He's also the author of a best-selling book, Sands of Time, which I do have a copy of, which I did read. And folks, this is not a small book. This book is so packed with information, it's not even funny. It's 119 chapters, okay, 512 pages. It's an amazing book about the MIB, Men in Black. So anyway, many of you will also remember Sean and his famous predictions on Coast to Coast with Art Bell. And, of course, Coast to Coast is still around today. And I'm going to look forward to asking Sean to, if he will, make a couple of predictions for us. And this is the man who believes that all is one, life has purpose, and God is love. I want to welcome my dear friend and comrade, Sean David Morton. Sean, welcome to the show.
It is good to see you. Dos Vidonia, Miss Comrade Roxy. How are you? Calling from Moscow.
Oh, wonderful, darling.
Can you hear me all right? Because I can't hear you in my headphones. I have no signal in my headphones.
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. I may have to reboot at the break, but I'm sort of listening to you through one box, and I don't know what's going on here. So I'll just we'll just wing it here. Just know that I'm a little crippled here because I'm literally listening to you. It sounds like you're about 3 inches high, transmitting out of a mini box here, and I can't hear you in my headphones. So I have to. So I'm listening to like the little mouse over here, which I know you're not, of course, and then trying to transmit without being able to hear you here because I just got a new computer and I just took everything into the new box because my old one blew up and Apple actually got me a new one, didn't get me what they were supposed to get me, but I'm sort of limping around with that today. So anyway, hi, how are you? And congratulations on the show. You're doing just fantastically well, and it's just great to have you along with us on the ride with the whole American Freedom Radio Network. It's just great that you brought your fantastic wisdom and brilliance and expertise and scintillating, sizzling, smiling personality over with you from all the from wherever you came from.
Thanks, Sean. I really appreciate that. And thanks for inviting me to be part of the family. You know, I'm real pleased to be here, and it's been a lot of fun. And you know, your show is right after my show, so this is kind of. Forgive me for the strange scheduling, but when we first scheduled you for my show, for The Truth Denied, that's when my shows were at noon, so that might have made more sense. So now, but. People get to hear you for 4 hours, and you know, I've been to seminars and hung out with you, and 2 days wasn't enough, so I don't think they'll mind.
Okay, cool.
All right, great. So are you comfortable enough to continue doing the show? I'm sorry you're having technical problems.
Yeah, actually what we'll do is I just got to reset my system. Let's try it for now. My settings on my computer, again, I'm so sorry. The settings on my computer are all screwy, so let's just limp through it until the break, and then I've got to reset some things and then reboot the system and get back to you. So let's just do it that way. We'll do it at the break, like at 17 or something. So. Oh,
sure, that's no problem. Okay, sounds like a plan. So, Sean, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, you know, being that Area 51 is it's still a phenomenon. I mean, you were the person that I saw you speaking at a seminar, at a MUFON seminar, and you gave us the directions to Area 51, and at the time that was 1990, and we actually went out to Area 51, and our minds were blown because it really did exist, and at that time it still was a laughable subject matter, a conspiracy, if you will. So from those days till where we are now, is there any new information about Area 51? Have you looked into it at all?
Yeah, it's I mean, we're just so far beyond what they were doing there now. When in my book Sands of Time, which thank you so much for the kind words. Everybody has just actually one of the best reviews I think I got on Sands of Time was somebody who said that Sands was one of those game-changing kind of books, very much like Whitley Strieber's Communion and Bill Cooper's On a Pale Horse, and that it was kind of a combination of those two things, and it was one of those books that was one of the game changers in the genre, that anybody that had anything to do or has any interest whatsoever in UFOs, science, alternative technology, black ops, shadow government, Area 51, the Dulce Mesa, I mean, I think I'm pretty fair in saying that it pretty much explains all of it from a guy that worked there and was in the innards of it and shows you how it all works from his personal perspective, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I mean, it's beyond. It's you know, the word I would use is complete. It's complete. It says it all. I agree completely. And so, with that in mind, do you want to talk a little bit about Sands of Time? Why don't we do that?
Yeah. So to answer the question, the interesting part about 5-1 is that, I mean, I first heard of it when I was a little kid. We used to hang around. Well, my father was a vice president in charge of customer communications. He was a public relations guy for TRW, and so he also started with Wally Schirra and Walter Cronkite, who were all really good family friends. This club for people in the aerospace business called the International Turtle Club, which was a very famous club for the astronauts and aerospace guys, whatever. So, I mean, all my Dutch uncles, if you will, were all astronauts, Gemini, Mercury, Apollo astronauts. And that was back in the day when it used to be called the Docktown Strip. I did an interview with astronaut Gordon Cooper, who was one of the original Mercury astronauts, who was the fastest man alive and the last American to travel into space alone. And Gordon was talking about things that he'd seen out there in the late 60s and early 70s. You know, we're now finding out from the memoirs of people like Ben Rich and Kelly Johnson, and some woman at the LA Times wrote a book with these old timer guys out there talking about basically U-2 fighters and stealth bombers and surveillance and reconnaissance, what's known as SR. The SR-71, the 72, the 73, the 74, the fighter stuff. But the UFO stuff was really pretty interesting because a lot of the UFO stuff got moved in there, as far as I could tell. It got moved over from the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base early on, and nobody could really figure out what to do with it. It wasn't until, I think, about 87 or so, just to recount a little bit of the story, about 86 or 87 was when they actually then decided to actually hangar it and build a new facility for it over across the way at Papoose Lake, which is sort of the next valley over. And Area 51 is just a map classification that, there's 49 and 52 and 13. And so the whole middle part of the state is basically a playground for the Air Force. Basically 89% of the state of Nevada is owned almost entirely by the federal government. And from Nellis Air Force Base in Vegas, basically the Air Force and the federal government owns everything up the middle of the state. You have to go around on highways 95 and 93 and then cut over on 375 because that's all the Nellis airfield. Literally, the federal government and the Air Force test field, if you will, is about 3 times the size of Switzerland. So to make a long story very brief, they had 9 captured flying saucers that they'd shot down using a combination of the HARP project and a device that they developed called the Thor's Hammer. And there's been different aspects of the Thor's Hammer. It's sort of like an electromagnetic pulse weapon that actually disrupts the proton exchange inside the engines of the ships. Doesn't make them explode, but it actually stops a particular an atomic reaction that actually powers the gravity amplifiers that makes these things go. So they shot a bunch of these things down, or they fell out of the sky. The ones that they actually got under something called Project Pounce, which was basically sort of a Delta strike team that was supposed to go anywhere, anytime, to go pick up bodies and ships and craft. That basically anything that fell out of the sky became the de facto property of the United States government, or else, that sort of thing. And we heard about it primarily because in late 80, God, I'm trying to get ahead, so long ago. I believe it was in late 88, December of 88, you had a scientist working there named Bob Lazar. Didn't have a very good experience at the place, got beat up by one of the commanding officers there, was constantly being threatened. He knew people like John Lear and Bill Cooper, and it wasn't until, I believe it was May, this is right, it was May of 89 that he did a blacked out interview with George Knapp, who was an Emmy Award winning reporter in Las Vegas. George Knapp and he does a show on Sunday nights on Coast to Coast, and George is my hero. He's a great guy. And he's still on KOLO Channel 8 Las Vegas. And he won an Emmy Award for a documentary he did called UFOs Best Evidence. And he did this interview with Lazar, a blacked-out interview, but didn't hide his face. And Lazar claims he got a threatening phone call that said, well, we saw you on TV tonight, and you have any idea what we're going to do to you? And then they asked him to come back to the base, because the minute you set foot on the base, you're literally outside the jurisdiction of the United States. You literally signed papers, and even Clinton signed another executive order that said that Area 51 does not come under the U.S. Constitution or the jurisdiction of the United States government. I mean, it's just completely its own country, basically. It has complete and utter sovereignty. And so Lazar freaked out. Whole series of circumstances went down, went public with it to basically, so that if they killed him, he would prove them right, kind of. And then he got attacked by all kinds of people. He was attacked by Stanton Friedman and, all the government disinformation agents in the whole Yabo UFO community. And Bob wasn't really looking for any name or fame out of this. And he did a little science lecture thing. He's never really cashed in on it. He's tried to put, I think, some movie projects together that have not really done very well. But I met him in 1990. When I was working with a documentary film crew on a documentary called UFO Contactees, and we interviewed him right after a lot of stuff had happened, but we did a very extensive interview with Bob, and I think it was late January, February of 1990 or so. And I was just behind the camera and sort of part of the crew, and Joe Randazzo was asking questions, and I was writing things down, and so I got a chance to meet him, and I met him a couple times after that at the Little Alien up there, and bottom line was that he said then, you don't have to believe anything I say. If you go out to the highway on 375, which the state of Nevada has now renamed the extraterrestrial highway, and you go stand by this mailbox at the 18-mile marker on Wednesday nights, which is when they test, between about sundown and about 6:30 and 9:30 or so, you'll see them. So it took me about a year to get out there, and I took a friend of mine that worked for the LA Times, and actually Norio Hayakawa and Anthony Hilder and George and Gary Schultz and all those guys have been coming out since, I think, they've been coming out since like November, December of like 90. And then I got out there in 91, and then, we literally had this UFO practically hit the car. I mean, it came right in front of us, stood on its edge, like in the road. and then kind of just bounced off. And we chased after it. We got our faces all burned by it. Got really close to this thing, but it was very low. I mean, it was floating, probably less than 15, 20 feet off the ground, and the thing was about 60 feet in diameter and had this reddish orange kind of pulsing glow around it. And again, was it something alien? I don't know. Nobody got out and talked to us. It could have been some military disc or project or a Townsend Brown UFO or something. But my friend, Shannon Sands, then the next day, February 26th, I think, of 91, which oddly enough was the anniversary. It was actually the anniversary of the Battle of Los Angeles, which was also February 26th of 1942. Because in 1942 there was a UFO that parked itself literally over downtown Culver City, right over here, Marina Del Rey, Culver City, that whole area, and it was on the front page of the LA Times. They called it the Battle for Los Angeles. It was this big UFO that was on the front page of the LA Times. But again, the weird part about this is that, and you'll know from being out there at the beginning, and this is a great thing about you, Roxy, is you've got the guts and you've been in this for a long time. I mean, here we saw the ship. Everybody there saw it, watched it bounce around, watched it do all kinds of crazy things, and yet they wouldn't put any of that in the LA Times story. They made it look like, I mean, there was a photographer there who we were saying, well, take a picture of it. It's over there. It's bouncing around. And he goes, I can't. We said, what do you mean you can't? He says, I have a Hasselblad portrait camera that's got a range of about 12 feet, and I was told to take pictures of people looking at UFOs, not to take pictures of UFOs. And we're like, well, what kind of crap is that? And then, and then he said, and it's raining, and I'm going home. And he jumped in the car and went home. And Shannon, my friend, who's the reporter, she's night blind in one eye and like clinically blind in the other. And we're jumping up and down, 30 of us, ooh and on, and she can barely see anything we're looking at because she's almost blind. So, and then it just got worse after that, because then we brought sightings out there. The same thing happened when I produced the segment for sightings for Fox, and now it's funny because now it's like the 25-year anniversary of Fox is now coming up here. But same thing, ship came up, started dancing around. They would not turn the cameras around. I got into literally like these fist fights in the letters to the editors page of Popular Science magazine, because these yabos like Stuart Brown, who claimed to be, I'm the aeronautics expert for Popular Science, and these jackasses in Popular Mechanics, and yet not once would they run any of our video, would they run any of our photographs, would they run any of, Gary Schultz took like a freaking close-up photo of an actual disc up over the horizon that was gospel proof of this thing, of one of these things being up there, and not once has that ever run in a major magazine.
Hold that thought, Sean. We're going to take a quick break, and maybe you can work out some of your technical issues. We're with Sean David Morton. It's The Truth Tonight.
Welcome to the world's meeting place. American.
It's practically narcotics.
Freedom.
Oh, yes. I like very much.
Radio.
You're an American institution.
American Freedom Radio.
Welcome back to The Truth Tonight. We're here with Sean David Morton, and as you could probably hear him in the background, we've had some technical issues a little bit, and I think, Sean, I think we can hear you. Go ahead and say something. We heard you testing. Okay. We can't hear Sean right at the moment, so I'm not sure what's going on.
There you go. Testing one. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I got it. Okay, we're good now. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem, Sean. No problem. So, yeah, anyway, where we had left off was we were talking about you do sound a little bit far away, though.
A little bit far away. Okay.
Yeah, you sound like you might be like on your way to the moon or something.
All right, I can't hear you in my headset.
You can't?
No, I can't hear. I can't hear me in my headset, but I can hear you.
Okay.
So, let me turn this up a little bit. Is that better?
Yeah, it sounds a little bit better. It's just a little trebly, little high-endy.
It's going to be that, because now I'm on a crummy little headset and not a box. My D-box doesn't work, and now I'm on a crummy little headset, so that's the way it's going.
No, you know what? You could never sound bad, Sean. No matter what it is, you can never sound bad. No, really, I'm serious. It's like,
stop buttering me up, Roxy Lopez.
Now listen.
You little fiend, you.
Absolutely. Listen, you love off with your head.
Thanks.
All right. So I put you back in order there. Okay, it'll be fine. It's fine. We're cool. So you were talking about, go back a little bit. We were talking about Area 51. We were talking about the cover-up. We were talking about, all the different entities that you had involved that, did it shoot any film on this or whatever. Did you end up actually shooting the base yourself? Did you, in other words, a photo?
Yeah, what finally happened was that nobody could really get close to the place. So what we were doing is I was going out there pretty much every Wednesday. I mean, once we got swooped by the UFO, I was hooked. So I was actually just jumping in my car, driving out Wednesday morning, get out there about 6 o'clock or so, and it was very cool. So just in my driving around the valley, spending the days in the valley, camping out in the valley, sleeping in the dirt, sleeping in the road, setting up a little tent there. I just kept getting closer and closer to the base. And, then I would go to the local sheriffs because I was not exactly being threatened by the base security guys, but they were coming, they were ominous. Let's put it that way. You would actually go towards them and they would just run away. But Doug Lamoureux, who was the sheriff out there, would come in and say, well, we've got a complaint or we've got this or that. So I would just go to the sheriff's office and say, look, I'm going to be out there. Here's the map. Here's the line. I'm going to be on this side of it. And, you guys have no right to go out there and hassle me when I'm on public ground. And they kept saying, well, you're challenging the base's border. And I'm like, I'm miles away from the base's border. If I'm in Las Vegas, if I'm in the state, am I challenging the base's border? There's a line. I'm on one side of it. I have no intention of crossing into their line. I'm telling you where I'm going to be beforehand. And, we still got hassled a bit by the sheriff, but eventually we had a pretty good, he didn't like the guys at the base any more than we did. So, we just tell him what was going on. So eventually I found a hilltop that actually was really kind of an exciting morning because the morning that I actually found the hilltop, which was May 31st, I think it was like it was 30th. Yeah, it was like May 31st, I believe it was. I was there with my girlfriend, and we were sleeping in this tent. And very early in the morning, we got buzzed by a helicopter. I mean, there was literally like a helicopter probably 15 or 20 feet above our tent. And, I popped my head out of the tent, and there was what looked like a guy that was pointing something at us, which at first I thought was a gun, and I thought we were dead, or it was a machine gun or something. And it turned out to be a long lens camera, so they could get a bunch of pictures of us. She went back to sleep. I then went up to the top of the hill, and I just finally said, well, if I climb around a couple of mountains, maybe I can see something. So I climbed up the top of Whitesides Mountain and realized, oh my goodness, I can see their house from here. And I could look right down the throat of the base and finding the top of this mountain. Now, while I'm on the mountain, my girlfriend is asleep in the tent, and the Whack and Hut guys go through my car. I mean, they break into my car and tear the car apart, and I can see them doing it from the top of the hill with my girlfriend asleep in the tent at the top of kind of a small hill about 100 yards away. And these guys are going through the car. And I'm like, what? Of course, it's like I can see them from the hilltop, but it's like 2 hours to walk down the hill. So I finally get down there, and I realize that these guys had stolen my wallet out of the car. And they'd stolen my wallet, and we went chasing after a couple of the cars, and they would just turn and run away. And then they'd go back over the line or just run away from us. And I said, well, I've had a Nevada driver's license like forever, and so I said, well, I've got to go get my license renewed, or I have to go back. We have to go back to Vegas and get the license. Now, the weird part about this was there was like 6 Whack and Hut trucks all around us, and they really wanted us to leave. They were really just pressuring us and following us, and it was, like I said, very, very scary, looking at us with the, with the sound guns, with the binoculars, the whole deal. So we go back to Vegas, and I go back to the Vegas DMV to get my driver's license renewed. Down there, and on our way back, all hell breaks loose at Area 51. On this particular day, there is a gigantic tornado, like an F4 tornado that breaks out with Area 51 at the exact epicenter of this tornado that creates a sandstorm in Vegas that shuts down the strip, that blows out the power, a helicopter crashes. It was one of those movie things where we're listening to the radio and it says, a series of mysterious explosions have begun at the northern area of the Nellis test site, also known as Area, and then all the radios go out. They shut the Excalibur Hotel down because sand is coming in through the vents. So we're trapped inside the DMV in the middle of one of the worst dust storms. I mean, it was like a Scirocco. It was like an Arab Scirocco. And the next day I got the LA Times, and they used to run these satellite photos in the Times, and it showed that this gigantic hurricane was Area 51 was at the dead center of this gigantic sandstorm that took up something like a third of the state, which was very strange. And then it got even weirder because about 2 weeks later, after my complaining that my wallet was stolen and the whole thing, I walk into my house, and I used to have roommates, and I used to have a room in my house that was all locked, and I unlocked my room, walked into my room only to then find my wallet sitting on the desk. Inside my house. Totally, even all the money was in there, the whole thing, sitting on my desk, just for them to tell me, we can get you. We know where you live now. We've been inside your home. It's probably bugged. And that was a pretty scary thing. I mean, it was, but that was then I went back 2 weeks later with a friend of mine, Fred Isles, and we actually camped out, freezing cold in the winter, up on top of the mountains there, and we actually hid under these camouflage tarps literally put like a pile of rocks over us, and we just hid up there all night and filmed the base and all kinds of really freaky stuff going on, little discs that were going real low, and then eventually the famous footage that then you see on virtually every TV show that has to do with Area 51, is really unfair because I've taken a lot of flack with people going, well, that's not a UFO, because there's this weird light that appears in the distance, and it's foggy, and this light comes in, and it's really eerie. I mean, it's very, very strange, and we got all excited at first, but then it wasn't doing anything interesting, and it was just coming in, and as it lands, you then see that, the red and blue lights go on. It's very strange because a whole bank of lights just lights up on the front of this aircraft, and then when it lands, it turns its lights on, not when it's in the sky. When it lands, it turns the lights on, and then we just said at the end of the tape, and we said this at the end of the tape, but nobody ever watches through the end of the tape where we just go, oh, well, it's just a plane. Because the next morning on the Thursday morning, a weird object would appear at exactly 4:50 a.m. that we used to call Old Faithful. And sometimes it would just be the lights of a plane because there's a special airline that goes from McCarran Airport, a whole corner of the McCarran Airport there that's controlled by the Air Force, that they call Janet flights. Now, interestingly enough, they used to be called Glanet flights, which stood for Groom Lake Aerospace Nevada Experimental Test Site. And Kelly Johnson, who was the fellow that ran the Skunk Works for many, many years for Northrop Grumman, died recently, along with Ben Rich and some major guys, and they renamed it the Johnson Airfield. So technically, it's not called Area 51 anymore. On the inside, they used to call it 5-1. Now they call it Johnson or the Johnson Airfield. So now they're called Janet flights, which stands for Johnson Airfield Nevada Experimental Test Site. So the Janet flights would actually come in, but then other times at 4:50, you would get this weird light that would dance around and do all kinds of crazy things, and it would be like a ship. So it eventually became a cover where they were sliding in tests of these crafts into the flight plan of guys that were coming out to the base at like 4:50 a.m. every Thursday morning. So as it stands now, eventually the military spent apparently millions of dollars to expand their border. In 1986, Area 51, when they moved the saucers in there, they expanded their borders by about 89,000 acres. And Harry Reid, who was the senator for Nevada, got very pissed off because this was sovereign territory for Nevada, and they were cutting off access to a gold mine. A silver mine that was owned by a gentleman that had it in his family for like 100 years. It was affecting because you used to be able to take your cows and just go over the hills and graze your cattle. So it was affecting cattle and commerce and water and the whole thing. And Harry Reid says, well, what exactly gives you the right to just grab 89,000 acres of territory out of a sovereign state? And the guys at 5-1 said, well, we answer to higher authority than you. And Harry Reid said, do you want to tell me who is higher than the Congress of the United States. And their exact words were, well, we'd be happy to answer that for you, Senator, behind closed doors. And they gave him and apparently a couple of big Mucky Mucks tours of Area 51, no doubt, with refreshments of a pine-scented Kool-Aid, no doubt. The famous pine Kool-Aid that's the mind control, the MK Ultra Kool-Aid. And these guys, and they're like, oh, okay, anything you want to do, and you can do anything you want. But as far as I know, we kept going out there from the biggest things that we saw the discs virtually every Wednesday. I mean, you could go out there, and it was like the drive-in. You would literally sit out there with your friends in your deck chairs, and these things would pop up and dance around. And if you're an old hat guy, you were like, you're a veteran, you're like, oh, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty good. And then if you just got there, you were like, oh my God, it's a flying saucer, not realizing people have dreamt their whole lives to see flying saucers.
Right.
The one huge thing that we saw that I thought was really the tip of the iceberg that was really important was there was something that was coming in. This was in the summer of 92. Summer of 92. God, it just all blurs together. Summer of 92 was like August of 92. I'm standing in my house in Hermosa Beach, and something weird happens where the ceiling starts shaking, then the windows, then the floor, and it was like an earthquake in reverse. And we're like, what the hell was that? And then the windows all go boom, and there's like these two big – it felt like sort of a rolling earthquake, but not happening from the ground up, happening literally from the sky down. So we turn on the TV, and there's Paul Moyer on Channel 7, and they have like Kate Hudson, I think it was, or Catherine who was it? Not Catherine whoever it was, it was Kate Hutton. That's who it was, Kate Hutton at Caltech. And they're laughing at the fact that, well, what you experienced was something that we're now going to call a skyquake. And these skyquakes are being caused by something that's coming in from space that's traveling at, we think, about Mach 25 and is landing at Area 51. This is on the news. And
wow. I never heard of that.
On the news, and Paul Moyer starts laughing about it, saying, well, the military denies any knowledge of this, and of course the mysterious Area 51. Of course, I'd made it famous by that time because we'd put it on the front page of the Times, and it had been in sightings, and we turned it into this gigantic cultural phenomenon, and I took Dean Devlin out there, who later made the movie Independence Day all about Area 51. I mean, his one question was, so if aliens were to attack the Earth, wouldn't Area 51 be our first line of defense? Wouldn't we have saucers there that we could fly and fight the aliens? And I'm like, yeah, Dean, yeah, that's exactly what we do. And lo and behold, 97, he does Independence Day, and it's like the number one biggest blockbuster of all time. So the thing that we saw, what we realized was what the news said is that they thought they were two delta-shaped objects that were traveling at Mach 25 that were creating these two sonic shockwaves that were creating the skyquakes. Okay, so John Hadley and I were out there, and what we saw fly right over our head after this rocking shockwave cracked the window on his truck, knocked us over, and then we saw all these little lights coming up the valley. And we're like, well, that's kind of weird. There's like a whole fleet of something coming towards us. And in the middle of that fleet was a gigantic – this was from tip to tail, it was literally like Star Wars, like the opening of Star Wars. So this thing comes over you, and you're just and it just keeps going and going.
Hold on a sec. We're going to go into a break, so just hold on just a second. We're going to be back with Sean David Morton, and I can't wait to hear the rest of this story. We're back with the Truth Tonight Talk Radio. I'm your host, Roxy Lopez. And boy, we're just getting into it, man, with this crazy story that Sean David Morton, my guest, is talking about with Area 51. And he was just about to get into this huge ship. He said he was just going to describe how big this ship was that was starting to head for them. Sean, you still with us?
Yeah, so this thing was probably by our best guesstimate was probably about 1,600 feet from tip to tail. Had a huge blunt shovel nose on it. That's approximately the size of the USS Enterprise aircraft carrier, or the USS Ronald Reagan. They give you an idea of how big this thing was. It had a blunt shovel nose on it, a big wide blunt shovel nose. It was cut in half, black on the bottom, white on the top, or a whitish sort of silverish metal on the top. It looked like two door stops kind of put together, and then the back end then tapered. It literally looked kind of like the back end of a Corvette with what looked like three large jets at the back of this thing. But it floated. It came over us. It was very strange because it didn't come right into the base. It actually came over our heads, over 375, took a turn at Rachel up over the hill, went around Bald Mountain, which is the where they've got a observation tower at the top of it, and it actually came in to Area 51 coming in from the north rather than where the runway, actually, because they've got the 7-mile long runway that actually leads to a main hangar that is supposed to be one of the largest aircraft hangars in the world, that they actually call it Hangar 18. I think that's a joke from the Wright-Patterson Hangar 18, but that's what they call the hangar there. And this thing then stops in midair, and then the back end of it just kind of floats down. It doesn't land like an airplane. It just hangs, and then it just floats down behind the hill. That was the only time that we were actively chased by the security guys, because Hadley was like, we got to go. And we pile everything in the truck, and suddenly, and he's got these night vision goggles on, so he looks like a bug. He looks like a praying mantis with his things. And he'd actually disconnected the taillights in his truck. So we're screaming down the highway, literally because I looked out in the desert, and there were 3 or 4 of these Whack-A Hut trucks coming after us. And we just all balls out of there. And I'm sitting there screaming like a madman. He's doing 120 miles an hour in this rickety truck in pitch darkness with these night goggles on. And we must have done the 18 miles between where we were and Rachel. I'm not even telling you, in 8 minutes. It was just, whatever it was. We tear in behind this wood pile, sort of smack the truck up against some wood, throw a tarp over it, and we were staying in one of these kind of trailers that they have that they laughingly call a motel out there. And we just dove in. We unlocked the thing, dove into this thing, threw the table up against it, threw a bunch of mattresses up against it, hid behind another table. He's got this big Colt 45 auto, and I've got this, this little tiny 38 detective special, and we're just, we've got these guns behind this table, just waiting for these guys to bust in and kill us. And it was funny because they looked all around, and they had the lights, and we heard the guys, being looked for by the cops, and they actually tried the handle on the door. This is very anticlimactic because they tried the handle on the door, and somebody goes, "Is it locked?" "Yeah." And he goes, "All right, let's go." That was it, and they left. And,
oh my God! And then did you guys leave after that? Get out of there at that hotel?
We spent the night. Actually, spent the night there, and then figuring they weren't going to bug us anymore, and and that was it. But that was that was what was causing the skyquakes. And I learned later from actually the source that gave me the material and the notes for the book, Sands of Time, that what was happening is that this was now, this is what was weird. 3 or 4 years later, on the Discovery Channel, they then have a show that's kind of a NASA kind of program where they're talking about the X-60. They were talking about the X-33 and the X-60 that they say is going to be the space shuttle that's going to be going between here and the moon and here and Mars sometime in about the year 2035. Remember, this is 92. 93. It's right in there. And then we see it on the TV, and John calls me and says, "Oh my God, you got to turn on the TV right now." We turn on the Discovery Channel, and we're like, we're screaming and jumping up and down, going, "That's it," because they had the prototype for this thing, but claiming that this was something that was going to be in the future, however long ago. And when you think about it, that's almost exactly right, because if you understand that corporate technology is about 3 to 5 years ahead of the market. It's all obsolescent. It's all designed to break. As I've learned, when the Apple Care warranty runs out, everything explodes. You've got military technology. You've got a certain level of government technology that's maybe 5 to 7 years ahead. You've got military technology that's maybe 10 to 15 years ahead of anything you've ever heard of. And then there's a level of technology that's really scary, that's over and above that makes you really question where the line between human beings and extraterrestrials and who we're working with. But it seems to be maybe 15 to 25 to maybe 30 years ahead. And if you know that the SR-71 Blackbird was probably doing Mach 3 to Mach 5 in, let's say, between 63 and 65, and then they declassify it in 74, and then they retire the whole program in 78, and not tell you, not tell you what's replacing it. It becomes very interesting, because then you see how the military technology all sort of plays out. But yeah, this is probably some kind of shuttle, and what I was told by Ted, the fellow in the book, was that this was basically an interplanetary shuttle, and that the shuttle had gone out of phase. And the reason it was creating those big sonic booms is that these ships actually create a gravity field around the outside of them that actually carries with it a pocket of air. So that and that's another interesting question about UFOs. If you have a UFO that's going from, right in front of you and then goes zip, zip, and you see all these famous pictures of these things zipping back and forth, going from between 0 to, Mach 3, in under a couple of seconds, why aren't they creating sonic booms? Why don't you hear kind of a kablam, kablam, kablam as they're moving from place to place? Because apparently they take this pocket of air with them that actually then interacts with the air, so that there's no collapse of the air that's actually making the boom or the sound. And it had something to do with this thing had to actually be fixed at Area 51, and that's why it was coming in. And they kept the calibration of it kept slipping, and so they kept having to bring it into 5-1 to fix whatever was going on with it. And meanwhile, the saucers were just kind of toys for a while, because what we did is we tore those apart and we back engineered them. And part of what Sands of Time is really about is the fact that the saucers were not just saucers, were not just interplanetary scout craft, or should we say just space-worthy scout craft, but that the saucers themselves were in fact time machines, that when you understand how the physics of these things work, that they were actually able to travel in space with basically a zero element of time. And that's what happens when you can create very, very very intense gravity fields or waves, that the minute you start actually messing with gravity and creating gravity, and once you know what gravity is, not what gravity does, but what it is. And that's the big thing, because nobody in science today will tell you what gravity is. There's no formula for gravity. But they'll tell you what it does. It does this, it does that, there's a planet, there's you jump in the air and you fall down. That's gravity. But what is it? And if you knew what it was, could you actually manufacture gravity as a wave or a particle or like a microwave or a gamma wave or an X-ray? And if you can do that, then that's basically the X factor that then allows us the quantum leap forward, because the minute you do that and the minute you're dealing with mass without having to worry about weight, that's a whole new ballgame. Then you can float cities into space. Then you in essence have the entire Star Wars reality, where everything in Star Wars, from the pod racers to the land speeders to everything there, simply just floats. I mean, it magnetically floats, making it anti-gravitic, and then it has like something that powers it forward, and then you're done. And now you're dealing with energy. And the minute you deal with energy, and you probably had this on your show and you'll encounter this quite a bit, the guys that are playing around with cold fusion or antigravitics or anything that breaks the second law of thermodynamics, where it actually creates or generates more energy than it takes in, suddenly you're in a whole new ballgame, because everything we do, every breath we take, every time we get up and we put our panties on and get our coffee and do whatever, it takes energy. And once energy becomes free, suddenly and you understand that the U.S. dollar is based on petroleum and based on the transportation of oil, and you can now have, say, a cold fusion reactor or maybe an anti-gravity device that spins a wheel that generates virtually unlimited power for nothing. Now you're in a whole new ballgame. You're in a whole new game where you can turn the Earth overnight, if you wanted to, into a beautiful paradise. And now you can travel to other planets and you can float cities into space, and and that's what's been specifically suppressed. And these are the advancements of people like Townsend T. Brown and Nikolai Tesla, or T. Townsend Brown and Nikolai Tesla, and all these great scientists throughout the years.
That's amazing stuff, Sean. And hopefully next hour we can take some calls. Truth Denied with Sean David Morton. We'll be right back. I'm Roxy Lopez. Our guest today is Sean David Morton. We were just talking about Area 51 and his latest book, Sands of Time, which is an incredible read. And, of course, Sean's getting into some of the we're backing up to Area 51 and some of these technologies that have occurred since the 80s. And we're sort of talking about right now free energy, really, and this energy system that is really in place that we are we aren't using. We don't we'd have a planet free of energy that none of us would have to pay for energy. So we were just rounding the corner of that. And for those of you who might want to call in, we'll open the phone lines. The number to call is 218-339-8525. That's 218-339-8525. So Sean,
by the way, it spells Fez, F-E-Z.
Does it?
The three. It's the phone number. The first three digits before the 8525 spell Fez. So you can put your Fez on and call us at 8525.
Alrighty then. Only you could see things like this. What I was going to ask you, being that we were talking about that whole free energy grid, is it possible that we could do we have the technology to use, I know it sounds like an oxymoron of a question, but do we have the technology to actually use this free energy grid yet?
Yeah, actually, well, of course. And the question is, here's the question. I'll ask you this question. You're the queen of the world, okay? I give you the dial and the ball and the sphere and the whole thing.
Thank you.
And I tell you, okay, Miss Roxy Lopez, my goddess, Rear Royal Highness, my queen. Behind closed doors, I tell you, I can give you this box. And this box can generate enough energy for the entire planet. And you can make 1 million of these boxes. And this box has a wheel inside of it that will spin forever. And you can take this box and plug it into your house and power your house. Plug it into your car, it'll power your car. Plug it into a plane or whatever it is you want to plug it into, it'll power it. Here's the question. Do you want to present with the way society is today, do you create a paradise? Or do you create virtually nothing more than a planetary ghetto where what happens if people don't have to work, don't have to get up, don't have to go to the hamster wheel, don't have to really accomplish anything? They can just, live in their grandpa's basement or grandma's basement and dance around to music videos like Madonna in their underpants or, whatever. I mean, that's a real question because what we've seen historically is that when you look at I'll give you an example of this. The example of the difference between, say, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey as an example. And people that are into, black politics will know who I'm talking about. Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey were saying, look, you've got to be independent. You've got to start your own businesses. You can't take handouts from the white man. You can't get involved in their welfare because it'll make you weak. It'll keep you down. It'll take the whole thing. Whereas on the other hand, you have Martin Luther King. I know he's more revered, but at the same time, Martin Luther King and Al Sharpton and these guys are more about the politics of entitlement. In other words, take what you can get. We deserve welfare. We deserve housing. Because here's what happens. When you create a welfare state or a project or whatever, it automatically turns into a ghetto. And then suddenly you have basically the politics of the ghetto. You have it's like rich people and poor people have the same problems. Rich people and poor people have drug addictions because they have too much time on their hands. They don't know what to do with their lives or existence. So the question becomes not scientific. The fact is that science has progressed rather than economically speaking, rather than scientifically speaking.
Sean, hold on just a second. I don't know what's happening, but I don't know if you can hear that, but we're just getting some real bad breakup. Yes, I did hear that. I'm talking to the producer right now. When you're talking right now, Sean, I'm telling you, it sounds like you're talking to us from another planet.
Okay. You can hear me now?
I can hear you, but there's a breakup and then there's a delay and no, it's in all my radio shows I've never even heard this type of noise. It's wacky. It's absolutely wacky. I can hear you, we can hear you, but it's like just totally breaking up hardcore.
Okay.
Now you're a little bit better.
I don't know what to do about that. So maybe
you're a little bit better.
Am I okay? How about now? Am I just overpowering the mic? Am I speaking loudly?
No, you're doing better now. No, you were never overpowering the mic. It just sounded like 15 different waves came in and harped on you or something. I don't know.
Oh, funny things seem to happen like that.
Exactly, but no, you're in again. So yes,
Okay.
Please continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's it. I mean, that's my question to you. What do you do?
What do you do?
You can provide free food, free power, free energy. Everything is all food is based on energy. All travel, all business, all commerce is based on energy. What do you do? Do you make the world a perfect place? Because people aren't perfect. Do you give them everything that they want, and do you sort of stop human advancement? Or do you create a matrix where everybody kind of has to, roll around in the hamster wheel and, to accomplish things and do what they're doing? That's the real question, because it becomes more.
Well, it is. It's a great question. It's a great question, Sean, and I've thought of that before for sure. But I think that because and you make a really good point. Do you want to slow down humanity, not keep them evolving or whatever? But I think that humanity can evolve outside of that, that wheel. Okay. And I think that humanity's actually starting to make that shift, going from a quote unquote slave race to an independent race. So,
right.
You know what I mean? So I actually think that, if I were the queen, and somebody brought that information to me, yeah, it would be really tricky if I were the queen, but I'm not the queen. So I say, free it up, free the energy, let it go, let it be, because things are, as far as where the planet is today in 2012, we're just ready for that type of shift anyway. We're done with being lied to, living in this matrix of full-blown lies. How are we going to advance anyway?
It's hard, especially when every day you're having kind of a nervous breakdown because you're being fed things through the media that are lies, that your own experience, that your own knowledge understands are lies. And when you get the fact that there's 6 people, 7 maybe tops, that now run all 25,000 forms of communication in the United States, which is radio, television, movies, books, whatever, that gets filtered through that. I mean, it's just, and then you turn on the internet and you get news from the internet, and the things from the internet where you can see things for the first time. You can see video of things occurring. You can see the evidence for yourself. You don't need the major news networks. But to get back to your energy question, yes. And if you look at everything from Stanley Meyer, who came up with a water car, basically an engine that runs on water. Who was then literally he went to an Applebee's with a group of these oil executives and jumped up in his chair, grabbing his throat, saying, "Oh my God, I've been poisoned," and went out and foamed up and died in the parking lot. Literally.
Is that something? Is that amazing?
Stanley Meyer. Then you've got another guy who's a doctor who was looking at radio waves and was finding that certain radio waves could cure cancer, and he realized that you could actually use a certain frequency of radio waves to light seawater on fire, as an example, and actually burn seawater. And there's a guy going, well, there's an interesting thing, not realizing that he's probably revolutionized the world, that you could fill your car up with seawater and basically have a radio tuned in it and run your car. Meanwhile, you've got Nikola Tesla. Let me give you the classic example of this. In 1923, Nikola Tesla took an old-style Bugatti, and he put a black box, this mysterious black box, up underneath where the engine should have gone, took the engine out, put this black box in, and he tore around, I think it was Chicago at the time, in this car doing speeds of 60 to 120 miles an hour with a black box that ran on no fuel, basically on earth energy, if you will. And after a month, people in the newspapers were claiming that Nikola Tesla was a witch, and that he should be burned at the stake because he was in league with Satan, and that he was using magic basically to make this car work. And there were people that were saying he should be stoned and burned and pressed under a door. And Tesla was like, people just aren't ready for this yet, thanks. And he took the box out and destroyed it. And actually the only reason I found the story out is because they recently sold the Bugatti at auction, without the box in it, of course, but it sold it at auction. So if all of this stuff is coming down, if T. Townsend Brown and Vannevar Bush and Einstein and Tesla John von Neumann and all the guys who worked on the Philadelphia experiment and all this military technology, is out there. Again, there are massive conundrums in any shift socially and politically in society. I mean, there's a reason why they call it political science, not political, I think this might work, or theory. It's a science. It's a science. If you do a certain thing and if you shock the organism a certain way. I mean, when I was in poli-sci at USC, when we used to use punch cards for these big computers, the whole thing was to come up with basically a diagram for how you run a society to create a series of punishments and rewards using taxes or money or what have you to be able to guide the organism, the amoeba of the public, towards the desired result or towards where you want them to go. You amplify that by 1 million times now. And now you've got what they call Zemi computers that are dealing with yottaflops, Y-O-T-T-A, yottaflops of information now. They haven't even come up with a word for anything bigger than that, by the way. And these are computers that actually hook directly into the human brain. These are guys who literally shave their heads and have bolts stuck in the different hemispheres of their brain and interact as the wet-wired hardware, if you will, to quantum computers that are doing things that, and actually it's really scary because they're called BEAST computers, B-E-A-S-T, Battle Engagement, Arena Simulation and Tracking. And the BEAST computers used in battle then can show a general, thanks to our buddies at Google Earth and Google Streets, can show a complete holographic mock-up of any battlefield anywhere and show you, we have Sergeant McLean is over here, and you know that because he's got a chip in his butt, and he's got this kind of rifle and this kind of Humvee, and it all feeds into what they call the MARC, which is the Multiple Automated Readout Computer chip that is either in the buttocks or they stick it behind the ear next to the carotid artery, so that if you get out of hand or you get captured and they want plausible deniability, they can pop this thing, remote control at a distance. It basically just eats away a niche in the carotid artery, floods your brain, and poof, you're dead. And that all leads into what they call a tessera system, or what they call Project Mosaic. And then Mosaic leads into this tessera that leads into the MARC, that leads into the BEAST, that leads into all this stuff that they put these biblical monikers on, which is all very interesting. There is another side to this, however, that I present in my book, Sands of Time. And it's changed a lot of people's minds because I, from the get-go, knowing these people and growing up with, and meeting these generals like Wesley Clark and General Westmoreland and, from the movie stars, the astronauts, to the generals, to then being involved in the media and interviewing these people when I worked at Hard Copy and Unsolved Mysteries and Geraldo and all these other things. I just started to think to myself, well, are all these people just really evil? Am I going to take the Alex Jones approach of, having a heart attack every day on the radio and busting a vein in my head to tell you that the only point of everything that they're doing is to create mass genocide, wipe out 5 billion people, supposedly leave only 500 million people left on the planet, which means you're going to wipe out 6.5 billion people. And then are these Illuminati elites just going to be big giant kings of a hill of dirt with nobody there to boss around? To me, that makes no sense. It makes no sense because if you're the master sitting in the house and you've got your slaves out picking cotton in the field, the only time you're going to do you really just run out of the house in the middle of the day with a shotgun and start shooting the slaves, picking your cotton? No, but if they get off the plantation, if they run away, if they decide to stop working and revolt against you, then yeah, you get out the guns and the sticks and the dogs and the riot gear, as we're seeing happening, being used against the Occupy Wall Street people and all that. So it's a very weird dichotomy here, where on the one hand, the slave masters of the earth, doesn't really make sense for them to come out and just murder everybody on the planet. Meanwhile, and you read Sands of Time, and I have to get your opinion on this. You saw from the other side that according to what's going on and what all this Black Ops stuff has been about and the Cold War and everything else has been the point of building, for all intents and purposes, a planetary defensive system, that something very big and very nasty is on its way here.
Right.
And after the alignments of 2012, somehow towards the end of this decade, it's going to get here. And we're going to be literally fighting for our lives against some kind of extraterrestrial threat. Or as Ted used to say, all the bad parts of the end of the Bible, where what does the Bible describe? It describes a war in space. The blonde angels, the Pleiadians, the Mr. Atkinsons, if you will, versus the dragon, versus Alpha Draconis and the dragon. And you could go to the Great Pyramid of Giza even, where it shows that the alignments, that the positive alignments with the Pleiades, like the eclipse coming up May 20th, every single time there's something that has to do with the Pleiades, or an alignment or an angle with the Pleiades, it has something to do with a major quantum leap in the advancement of mankind. And I think that the other way to do this too is if we advance and if we get to the point where we ascend spiritually, emotionally, if you will, then either it allows these positive forces in the universe to step in and help us, very much like an angelic conflict, if you will, allows them to provide us with, because we then choose what side we're going to be on. And at the same time, and I said this to Ted, to the guy that gave me all this over the course of the 20 years that I knew this fella, before he, quote, moved on a couple of years ago. I'm like, look, it sounds to me like another scam. It sounds to me like another Cold War. You and I both know that the Cold War was probably the biggest hoax that was ever perpetrated on the world, that the Russians were never a threat, that we built them up to be a threat, that the minute the Russians collapsed, we then turned around and started funneling technology to the Chinese so the Chinese could be the next big threat. And even they are about ready to collapse as well. I mean, their economy is like Japan right about 1984, 85. For every product that comes out of China, every dollar in products that come out of China, it costs them probably 98 to 99 cents to make every product that comes out of there, which means the minute the United States starts going belly up, the Chinese are going to shatter. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. And we'll talk a little bit about that. I want to talk about the eclipse, too, and all the other things going on.
Let's do that. Absolutely. I do, too. You're listening to The Truth Denied. Our guest is Sean David Morton, and we'll be right back. Hang in there. This Truth Tonight Talk Radio with Sean David Morton here. We're just rounding the corner, and we're going to talk a little bit about this eclipse that's coming up. And I'm sure that we're going to get into this Mount Shasta. I would love to come to this, by the way, on May 20th. So welcome back, Sean. I would love to.
Okay, we just had a bunch of rooms open up. So. Actually, oddly enough, we thought we were sold out, and 7 more suites opened, and I think a bunch of stuff in town actually opened up as well. So
I did. I looked at the website and at your website, and I was looking at it today, ironically, and I was like, "Wow, this looks really awesome." Right. Why don't we talk about it? And thanks. I've been into so many different things that you've been a part of over the last 25 years. So
they're always fun, right?
They're always fun, and it's just like this. It's just like you have this amazing ability to make everything just intense. I mean, anytime I remember when you spoke over at Ocean Shores, and I had no intention, right, of going out to James Gilliland's ranch, and then you were like, "Let's go, let's watch UFOs, let's go out to East Eddy Ranch," and boom, we all got in, cars, and boom, I don't know, it took about 3 hours. It was a 3-hour drive. I had to cross over that bridge that went over the river that remember that bridge?
Yeah, it was great fun.
Oh my God, it was insane. And then of course we get, I get to meet James Gilliland, and that was exciting, and there was all kinds of crazy stuff going on. Yes, anytime I've done anything with you, it's just like a race to the finish. It's like are you like this 24/7, Sean?
Yeah, it's all action and adventure. And I think people on the radio need to just realize we go back almost 25, more than 25 years.
Yes.
You and I. So way, way back in the day. And I just want to say again that Roxy Lopez, you stomp on the terra, honey. You're not one of those people that just reads about it. You do it. You have the experience. You go there. You get in people's faces. You do the investigation. I mean, there's so few people in the radio and in the media that just do the work, that go out there and become the source and that build a pedigree. And that's exactly what you've done. You have built a fantastic pedigree as an investigator and as a person who goes out and meets the people and gets the story firsthand. And And that's just completely lost, especially in an internet age where basically all anybody does is just regurgitate everybody else's regurgitations. So it's just, one person vomits into somebody else, who vomits into somebody else, who vomits into somebody else. And it's just, that's why there's nothing fresh and nothing really new and kind of interesting out there. So, anyway, I'll just you got nothing but my love and nothing but my respect, because every single time you've said, let's go, let's do it. You've been game, and you don't just walk the walk. You don't just talk the talk, you walk the walk. And
thank you. I appreciate it. Well, so do you.
5 people I can think of that I can say that about on Earth.
Well, I definitely don't want to be stuck inside a virtual reality. So, you know what I mean? I can't. The reason I do all this is because my Irish grandmother, somebody would call up and say, "Hey, Sean, let's go do something." I'd go, "Nah." My grandmother would go, "What? Never turn down an adventure, because you know what it's like sitting in the fucking house." And right.
But she'd turn the TV off. She'd literally just grab me by the scruff of the neck and throw me out the door. And I'm like, you know what it's like sitting inside? Go out and go outside. Go have an adventure. And that's what she always said. Never turn down an adventure, because you know what it's like sitting in the house. And that has become the motto of my life. And that's why I just go do stuff, because I know what it's like sitting here. I don't know what it's like out there. And I think if you travel and if you go places and if you meet people, then it makes you a better person.
Absolutely. It's way more exciting, that's for sure. And I think it's important as well to exchange some vibes with Mother Earth, which is what this Mount Shasta thing's all about. So let's talk about, because there's just layers to this whole thing. So go for it. Let's talk about what the whole thing's all about.
Off the top, you can go to Shasta Eclipse 2012, Shasta Eclipse 2012, to check out the website. We've had it for a while. I'm putting it together with my friend Susan Shumsky, Dr. Susan Shumsky. I've been dreaming about this now I've been talking about this eclipse and this particular moment in time, building up to this for almost 7 years, I think. The first crop circle that I saw that I began to, it goes back a ways, in the 90s. 96, 97, 98, when I was doing a show called Strange Universe, and I was one of the original creator producers on one of the first original programs on the United Paramount Network under Bill Siegel, who was and Lucy Selhaney, who was the president, Bill Siegel, who was the owner. I met a UFO contactee named Adrienne, who was a Pleiadian contactee, rode on the spaceships with his girlfriend, took video, photos, went to Disneyland, sent the postcards, the whole deal. And he talked a lot about the crop circles at the time and about how there was a guard that was changing between the Pleiadians. Once again, this is him talking. I'm not a contactee or an abductee. I've seen UFOs in Egypt. I've seen them, a zillion of them in Area 51. Oddly enough, 2009, Halloween, out in front of my house in Hermosa Beach, we had a whole fleet of UFOs literally do maneuvers for about an hour that everybody saw here in Hermosa Beach and filmed. And you can actually go on YouTube, Hermosa Beach UFOs. It's right there from the video that we took that night. So he's telling me that a couple of major things he was saying. One, that the Pleiadians were kind of backing off of the planet because no matter what they did, their karma was somehow being messed with. And basically, the Pleiadians didn't really know what they were doing. That everything that the Pleiadians tried to do to help fix the planet, again, it's like my conundrum of, do you give people free energy or do you destroy the world by doing that? And the Pleiadians just felt like every time they tried to contact a leader, every time they had a contactee, everything went wrong. So they backed off the planet. Now you have a new gang coming in called the Andromedans. And the Andromedans were kind of interesting because there's a council in Andromeda. Once again, not a contactee, abductee. I'm just relating secondhand information here of what this guy, Adrienne, told me. There's a council in Andromeda that basically kind of decides stuff for this sector of the galaxy. And Earth is kind of the dumb kid on the block, where there's like 48 evolving worlds that have to do with this whole sector of the galaxy. And everybody this time around has to evolve to the next level. It's like if we're held back, then everybody else gets held back. Everybody has to graduate because the frequency or the vibration of this sector of the galaxy is reaching a certain critical level. And at the same time, this is happening, you have one other group here called the Arcturians. And the Arcturians are the ones making the crop circles. The Arcturians, even though they appear to be very small little balls of light, they are 10th dimensional energy beings, if you will, like corporate energy beings. In fact, these ships are like miles across, and the only way that I can describe it is anybody that's a fan of the best show on TV right now, which is a show called Doctor Who, with Matt Smith as the new Doctor, understands what a TARDIS is. That a TARDIS stands for time and relative distance in space, or dimensions in space, actually, and the TARDIS is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. The Arcturians are the same way. And the Arcturians, being these corporate kind of energy beings, were the ones that stepped in the late 90s that said that the flame of Earth is flickering, and that we are a valuable species, and that we are the heart of the grand man, is what they called it, of the universe. Apparently, the entire universe is like the physical body of an incomprehensibly large being, and that we are worth saving. And that they were stepping in to basically start driving off the reptilians. And Stonehenge, England, is a place for them to do this because, number one, the Salisbury Plain in Stonehenge is the solar plexus chakra of the planet. In other words, there's a 6-chakra energy system. The base root chakra is Lhasa, Tibet, where the male aspect of the God ray strikes the planet. The prostate ovarian chakra, or the belt of the world, is the Great Pyramid of Giza, or the 3 pyramids, very much. That's why they're in the shape of Orion's belt. Because it's literally like the center of gravity for the Earth. The solar plexus is Stonehenge. The heart is Machu Picchu. The throat is downtown Los Angeles. And the third eye chakra is Osaka, Japan. Actually, it's Tenri City, which is a sacred city outside of Osaka, where a religion was started in the 1840s, an offshoot of Shinto Buddhism, that was started by a woman named Oyama, who was actually channeling Pleiadian extraterrestrials in the 1840s, and actually did this offshoot of Buddhism. And the very flag of Japan, the big red sun or the red dot, is actually the Bindu of the third eye, and represents the rising sun of consciousness. And the 7th chakra is the Messiah. The 7th chakra is the Christ, or the Buddha. I am the chief cornerstone that the builders rejected. And so there is no 7th chakra yet, because we're not a sacred world. But the idea is that the 7 chakras, all of us, is the communication and the interconnectedness of all of us through the internet and telecommunications. So all these things that we've seen evolving are all directly in tune with the natural evolution and ascension of the planet, from the invention of the internet to telecommunications to the fact that we can do this radio show with, me and my headquarters and my, fantastically palatial estate with the lawns and the topiaries and the bowling alleys and the basketball courts, all that. And you can do it from, your palace on high and from the Valley of the Sun there in Arizona. So now, okay, so let's jump to the next step. So there was a crop circle in 2005, and this crop circle in 2005, which, by the way, is the symbol for the show Ancient Aliens, which I think I've been on like 10 episodes of that now. It's a symbol for the show. And what it shows is a partial solar eclipse with what looks like a Hopi what looks like a Hopi sun disk, or a Hopi cross, if you will, and then it's inside a Mayan calendar that's all 13s and 20s. It's literally inside a Tzolk'in wheel that gives us the date of 2012. This is 2005. And the reason I went into the whole thing about the Arcturians and about the Pleiadians and about my friend Adrienne is because he said, number one, that the Arcturians were going to start making these crop circles, and the crop circles were going to begin to predict the future, and that people that knew what they were doing, that understood the Mayan calendar and astronomy and astrology, were going to be able to predict future events via these crop circles. And lo and behold, about 5 years later or so, that's what started happening. The other thing that he said specifically was, as the Pleiadians backed off, that the big thing the Pleiadians were concerned about was, and this was 97, he was telling me this, and he took photos like out the window of the craft of like Pleiadian ships around the sun. He kept saying that something's wrong with the sun, and that there is a great concern amongst all the various extraterrestrial races to fix the sun, and that the sun was going to go crazy between 2012 and about 2016 or so. And the biggest thing being is that the hold on one second. We can't she stopped dancing around. My wife's being very distracting. She's jumping up and down and cursing to herself here in the room while she's trying to fix something. Thank you. But the whole point is that the sun was going to go crazy, and that the end of 2012 is going to be – this whole year is kind of a trick. It's a trick because the media is telling you it's all going to be disaster. You know, they've got car commercials on the Super Bowl, which I'm sure you probably saw, where, you know, the world ends and it's the Mayan apocalypse. And did you watch the Super Bowl? Did you see the commercial?
I didn't see the commercial, so I have no idea what you're talking
about. The commercial on
about.
the Super Bowl is the guy starts his car up, the world has ended, there's a UFO that's crashed into, you know, the Empire State Building. He's driving his car through, you know, you see newspaper headlines that say, you know, world ends December 21st, 2012. And he meets up with a bunch of guys that are driving like Chevy trucks. And he goes, "Where's Bob?" And they go, "Bob drove a Ford." And they all just look down at the ground and shake their heads. And that's the commercial.
Oh, my God.
That was the commercial.
That's awesome.
Now you have other commercials.
But you're right. I've seen a couple other commercials too that say, you know, on December 21st, 2012, the world's supposed to end and blah, 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 blah. But just in case it doesn't, please come and invest with us. There's like one investment firm that's got one of those out there. But I get the mess. I get the picture. So yeah, that the end of the world scenario, but at the same time, nothing's really, you know, 2012 is just another year too.
Because it's a trick. It's not just another year. It's a trick, and the trick is that it's not the end. It's the beginning of the end. In other words, we get over the top of the hump on that day. It's like 51%. The 51%, it becomes 51% positive and only 49% negative. Whereas before, the deck was stacked against us, you know, probably originally 90-10, then it was 80-20, then it was 70-30, then it was 60-40, and very, very slowly. I mean, I turned on Dr. Oz today before I came on the show, and Dr. Oz is talking about the 5 Tibetan rites, the exercises that I've been teaching for forever, and he's talking about Ayurvedic medicine and the 7 chakras and how to eat foods for the chakras, and this is on Dr. Oz. This is like the number one daytime
right.
show. And so the consciousness is so shifted into people being aware of the chemtrails and the food and the poisoning and all the other things that are going on. But the good news is that with the amazing things that are happening is that then I see this crop circle. And the crop circle then has an eclipse, and it has 2012, and it's a partial eclipse actually in the it's either a partial eclipse or the eclipse just about ready or just starting. And I thought, okay, where would you see a partial eclipse in 2012? Then I checked the eclipses, and there's 2. And the one eclipse obviously starts in Tenri City, Japan, directly over the 6th chakra, goes over the Pacific, comes across the very top of the San Andreas Fault, right off the coast of Eureka, where there's a whole series of underwater volcanoes and all kinds of crazy things that actually it's where the Cascadia Fault Line and the San Andreas and the Juan de Fuco Plate and all these platelets all interconnect. So not so good when you have an eclipse going right over those, because if people will remember, the last major solar eclipse that we had, which was August 11th of 1999, and we actually went to Vienna to go visit my family because my uncle is a Baron Ulrich von Sultenhammer in Vienna, and we went to my uncle Uli's place to go see the eclipse, but at that
hold that thought, Sean. We'll definitely, and we're going to be winding it down. The Truth Denied with Sean David Morton. It's just never enough time. We'll be right back. It is Friday. We're down to the last 15 precious minutes with Sean David Morton. It just flew by. Sean just sucked all of the last 2 hours up into a big vortex, and then we're going to make a video of it and share it.
Oh, are you saying I suck? Why would you say I suck?
No, I didn't say you suck. I said you sucked it all up into a big vortex. Big difference. Into a sacred bubble. I didn't say you suck. Slap you. Oh, by the way, I was going to ask you, the Sands of Time. I have the Sands of Time, the book that you wrote. Yeah. I have that on my website first. It's on the front page of our website. It has been for about a month. And so people, you are very welcome. And so anybody can purchase this excellent book from our website, and we do seem to have a lot of traffic, and I don't know if you're getting some of it or not. But is there anywhere else that you want to recommend purchasing the Sands of Time?
Yeah, they can go to our website, which is actually strangeuniverseradio.com. So strangeuniverseradio.com. Okay. They can get it, and we're working on a big publishing deal, and we're trying to talk to some people about turning it into a miniseries. Because I've got a pilot, and I've got like 13 episodes to turn this into a miniseries and do something with it. And there is the sequel. There's more to come. So there's a lot more stuff out there. It gets really wild because basically Sands of Time just sets up part one of the Tempus Fugit Chronicles. It basically just shows you how the time travel is developed, and then it gets really crazy because then there's Nazi Vril Damen women in the 1920s channeling beings from Aldebaran that, all true stuff, absolutely all true stuff about how the hell do the Nazis go in less than 20 years go from biplanes and stop with camels and basically canvas and wire to, in essence, interplanetary travel in under 20 years. And if anybody understands the implosion drives and the anti-gravitic drives and the super science that the Germans had, it's amazing. And it actually all came from these 5 women called the Vril Damen who were channeling literally Sumerian writings and Babylonian writings from supposedly beings from Aldebaran, and it gets even crazier. And that's the history. I mean, that's the real stuff. That's the real stuff. And you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And Rudolf Hess and Hitler actually coming into this and basically putting the might and power and finances of the Third Reich behind stuff that we would just think of as completely crazy today. And it's the absolutely true history of the mystical aspect of the Third Reich and the Thule Society and all that. So there's more to come. I mean, there's lots more in there. And we're working on scripts about Dulce and all kinds of other things. So Sands of Time, everybody loves it. I had Jerry Levin, former head of Warner Brothers, call it a masterpiece. I had some other people say that it was I'm buying. The great thing is people are buying like 5 or 6 copies of it and then giving it to their friends. So because it's become that important to people. So thank you for the plug. And Sands of Time, I guarantee you guys will absolutely love it. Guaranteed.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. And by the way, peeps, it is a book that you can't put down. I mean, so take a weekend, buy the book, and just sit down and read it because you won't be able to put it down. I mean, it's just and then when it was over, Sean, I'm so glad that you said there's going to be a sequel, because when it was over, I was like, no, because it became my life for a few days. You know what I mean? It was just like I was just so wrapped up in it. So good job on that. And then I just want to let people know also that the Shasta retreat, that's the www.shastaeclipse2012, and I'll have all this information on the video and everything. So we'll continue to let people know about this. May 20th, I believe that's the date, isn't it?
Yeah, you want to let me just go down the list of some really important things as to why this eclipse is so cool. You want to do that? Is that how you want to wrap it up, or you want to? So let me tell you this and why it's so fun. All right, so number one, 2005. There's a crop circle that basically predicts the future, that not only points to this eclipse, but also says that there's a 16-day period. Okay, so this eclipse is actually cutting across Mount Shasta. The lower section of Utah cuts across the Hopi Nation at 4 corners and eventually winds up sort of terminating at the heart of the Dove, right dead center of Lubbock, Texas, which is sort of at the heart of the United States. It's the first time in 26,000 years that the sun here's what's interesting, is that the pyramids of Chichen Itza in Mexico and the Jaguar Pyramid in Tikal in Guatemala, those pyramids specifically were geared, or let me say, were built specifically to be in line with the Earth, not only in 2012, but with these eclipses. The sun began to go over the top of those pyramids beginning in May of 2000. This year, May 20th of 2012, was the first time in approximately 26,000 years, 25,940 years, that the sun and the moon and the Pleiades all directly align. The Pleiades is actually a constellation of about 200 very, very old blue-white stars, even though it looks like 7 visible stars from where we are at here. Even though our solar system rotates around the galaxy, we actually rotate in a smaller rotation around the central star in this sector of the galaxy, which is Alcyone, which is also in the constellation of the Pleiades. the Venus transit that is occurring on 16 days later. Let me do the rest of the eclipse stuff. First time in 26,000 years you have the sun, the moon, and the Pleiades all directly in a straight line. First time that you actually have this eclipse actually cutting across the United States over one of the most sacred vortexes on Earth, which is Mount Shasta. It is believed that Mount Shasta is a remnant of the ancient civilization of Lemuria, that it is an interdimensional gateway and vortex. It is sacred to the ascended master, Saint Germain. It is believed that the ancient Lemurian city of Telos still exists somehow interdimensionally beneath Mount Shasta. There's a massive cave system or flumes where the energy of Mount Shasta, you can actually work the energy of Northern California and basically the entire Pacific Northwest. This eclipse also heralds the Sabian symbol, if people understand those, for this eclipse, is that the Sabian symbol is a glass-bottom boat that allows us to see into the murky depths of the ocean of the subconscious mind. The fact that this eclipse is occurring right at the end of Taurus and the beginning of Gemini is the beginning of the ripping off of the veil that has been on the right-hand side of the brain for 26,000 years that will then plunge us into complete integration of the right and the left-hand sides of the brain. When the Venus transit occurs 16 days later, that transit, Venus moving across the face of the sun, was the most important date in the Mayan calendar. They built a whole observatory to it. The Mayans believe they traveled here. They all come from the planet Venus. And in essence, it is the redemption of Eve. It is the final clarion call for the women on the planet to go back to being women, to go back to the sacred feminine, to go back to being the caregivers and the pleasure givers and those who are filled with grace and love and acceptance and unconditional forgiveness, and allows us to move back into an experience of quantum time. And quantum time is the past and the present and the future all happening at once. The key to December 21st of 2012 is we learn not only physically with machines how to travel through time, but mentally are able to view the past and the present and the future. These two events, the solar eclipse and the Venus transit, are both depicted on the final plate of the Mayan Codex that then shows because there are two symbols on the underbelly of this black water dragon, this sky serpent that's like vomiting up all this brackish water on the earth, and there's these two black demons with rattles with seven macaw that are creating this. They're getting the dragon to destroy the world. So these two eclipses, these two events, were prophesied by the Mayans as being two of the most important events in their calendar. Will herald the end of time. Now, it's weird, though, because there's two eclipses. There's another eclipse on November 13th, which goes from the top of Australia across the Atlantic Ocean and just kind of peters out off the coast of Chile. There's only one island on Earth called the island of San Juan de Frisco, where you can witness the final eclipse and the Venus transit at the same time. It is also believed that Coke Balam, who was the greatest king of the Mayans, he ruled for 46 years, his tomb disappeared. We don't know where he was buried. But now there's a Discovery Channel special that did this. They believe that he's now buried on the island of San Juan de Frisco, and they believe that they found his tomb because this king believed that if he could watch the final eclipse and the Venus transit before the end date of December 21st of 2012, that he would reincarnate in this world as the Lord of Time. And what else is there to this eclipse? It is stunning. We have the San Francisco Astronomy Club. They're actually coming up from San Francisco with all their telescopes that are all going to be fitted with lenses so you can watch the eclipse, not only live because we have these custom goggles for people to watch it, but you can actually watch it on a monitor and actually see the energy of the sun actually in the annular eclipse actually coming out from the moon. The 16 days between May 20th and June 8th are going to be 16 of the most radical, earth-shaking days on Earth. I believe we are going to see massive earthquakes, huge tidal waves, revolution, revolt. At the same time, I think in that period of time, we're going to see another gentle shifting of the poles, very much like we saw with the Japanese earthquake, with the Chile earthquake, and with the Indonesian tsunami back in 2004. But what these giant quakes are doing is that they are speeding up the rotational frequency of the Earth, which is good. They are readjusting the land masses to keep greater quakes from happening. And they are very slowly readjusting the axial pole of the Earth, so that when we hit the alignment, not only with the center of the galaxy, but there's another alignment as well that's going to take place in February of 2013. And it's with the dark brown dwarf star called Nemesis. All this crap that they're talking about, Nibiru and all that other stuff, and the 12th planet.
We've got 1 minute, Sean. 1 minute.
Okay, that's it.
I don't mean to cut you off. We could just keep going.
Purpose got us loved, and you guys can listen to my show in like 10 minutes.
Exactly. You'll be going right on, and I'm sorry I made you do double duty.
Fine. Thanks
I really appreciate you coming on the show, and we'll get all of this information out to the public, and if you need me for anything else, just let me know, and maybe I can hang out with you, as I have done many times in the past. Give my love to Melissa, and of course, you know I love you, so thanks so much for taking the time to come on my show today. I really appreciate it, Sean.
Bye.
Bye. And that was Sean David Morton, a good friend, good buddy, many, many years.
Welcome to the world's meeting place. American.
It's practically narcotics.
Freedom.
Oh, yes, I like very much.
Radio.
You're an American institution.
American Freedom Radio.
The American Freedom Radio Network proudly presents, live from Phoenix, Arizona, The Truth Denied Talk Radio with host Roxy Lopez. Join us here every Friday from 7 to 9 Central for topics you won't hear on mainstream news, such as chemtrails, GMOs, Morgellons disease, and much more. Humanity is 7 billion strong. We are the majority. If you would like to speak to the host, the call-in number is 218-339-8525. And now, live from the Valley of the Sun, your host, Roxy Lopez.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Truth Denied Talk Radio. I'll be your host today, Roxy Lopez. And boy, it is the Valley of the Sun. I'm not kidding you. It is almost 100 degrees today. Went from 60-something to almost 100 degrees. So I guess we're going to go over 100 this weekend. So we're hitting some record highs. Of course, we're in a drought position as well, so that's no fun. So my guest today, I want to give you a little bit of background for those who are new to my guest. His name is Sean David Morton. And Sean, when I met Sean, he was investigating Area 51 at the time. This is in the 80s. He filmed it for the first time, and it even ended up on the front page of the LA Times, making the subject a worldwide phenomenon. So that's how my attraction was to Sean David Morton, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And Sean is a writer and a producer, a reporter for Strange Universe, Hard Coffee Sightings. He's appeared on countless shows, Best Kept Secrets being one of them, and of course my favorite show, Ancient.
And I just took everything into the new box because my old one blew up, and Apple actually got me a new one. Didn't get me what they were supposed to get me, but I'm sort of limping around with that today. So anyway, hi, how are you? And congratulations on the show. You're doing just fantastically well, and it's just great to have you along with us on the ride with the whole American Freedom Radio Network. It's just great that you brought your fantastic wisdom and brilliance and expertise and scintillating, sizzling, smiling personality over with you from all the from wherever you came from.
Thanks, Sean. I really appreciate that, and thanks for inviting me to be part of the family. You know, I'm real pleased to be here, and it's been a lot of fun. And you know, your show is right after my show, so this is kind of. Forgive me for the strange scheduling, but when we first scheduled you for my show, for The Truth Denied, that's when my shows were at noon, so that might have made more sense. So now, but. People get to hear you for 4 hours, and you know, I've been to seminars and hung out with you, and 2 days wasn't enough, so I don't think they'll mind.
Okay, cool.
All right, great. So are you comfortable enough to continue doing the show? I'm sorry you're having technical problems.
Yeah, actually what we'll do is I just got to reset my system. Let's try it for now. My settings on my computer, again, I'm so sorry. The settings on my computer are all screwy, so let's just limp through it until the break, and then I've got to reset some things and then reboot the system and get back to you. So let's just do it that way. We'll do it at the break, like at 17 or something. So.
Oh, sure, that's no problem. Okay, sounds like a plan. So, Sean, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, being that Area 51 is it's still a phenomenon. I mean, you were the person that I saw you speaking at a seminar, at a MUFON seminar, and you gave us the directions to Area 51, and at the time that was 1990, and we actually went out to Area 51, and our minds and aliens at this point. And we'll talk a little bit about that hopefully today too. Sean is also dealing with the Great Pleiadian Eclipse alignment, and we are going to definitely delve into that. This happens once every 26,000 years, and there's a celebration that's going to occur at Mount Shasta, and Sean David Morton is a part of that. He's also the author of a best-selling book, Sands of Time, which I do have a copy of, which I did read. And folks, this is not a small book. This book is so packed with information, it's not even funny. It's 119 chapters, 512 pages. It's an amazing book about the MIB, Men in Black. So anyway, many of you will also remember Sean and his famous predictions on Coast to Coast with Art Bell, and of course, Coast to Coast is still around today. And I'm going to look forward to asking Sean if he will make a couple of predictions for us. And this is the man who believes that all is one, life has purpose, and God is love. I want to welcome my dear friend and comrade, Sean David Morton. Sean, welcome to the show.
It is good to see you. Dos Vidonia, Miss Comrade Roxy. How are you? Calling from Moscow.
Oh, wonderful, darling.
Can you hear me all right? Because I can't hear you in my headphones. I have no signal in my headphones.
I can hear you perfectly.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. I may have to reboot at the break, but I'm sort of listening to you through one box, and I don't know what's going on here. So I'll just we'll just wing it here. Just know that I'm a little crippled here because I'm literally listening to you. It sounds like you're about 3 inches high, transmitting out of a mini box here, and I can't hear you in my headphones. So I have to. So I'm listening to like the little mouse over here, which I know you're not, of course, and then trying to transmit without being able to hear you here, because I just got a new computer.
Were blown because it really did exist, and at that time it still was a laughable subject matter, a conspiracy, if you will. So from those days till where we are now, is there any new information about Area 51? Have you looked into it at all?
Yeah, it's I mean, we're just so far beyond what they were doing there now. When in my book Sands of Time, which thank you so much for the kind words. Everybody has just actually one of the best reviews I think I got on Sands of Time was somebody who said that Sands was one of those game-changing kind of books, very much like Whitley Strieber's Communion and Bill Cooper's On a Pale Horse, and that it was kind of a combination of those two things, and it was one of those books that was one of the game changers in the genre. That anybody that had anything to do or has any interest whatsoever in UFOs, science, alternative technology, black ops, shadow government, Area 51, the Dulce Mesa. I mean, I think I'm pretty fair in saying that it pretty much explains all of it from a guy that worked there and was in the innards of it and shows you how it all works from his personal perspective, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I mean, it's beyond. The word I would use is complete. It's complete. It says it all. I agree completely. And so, with that in mind, do you want to talk a little bit about Sands of Time? Why don't we do that? Yeah.
So to answer the question, the interesting part about 5-1 is that I first heard of it when I was a little kid. We used to hang around. Well, my father was a vice president in charge of customer communications. He was a public relations guy for TRW, and so he also started with Wally Schirra and Walter Cronkite, who were all really good family friends. This club for people in the aerospace business called the International Turtle Club, which was a very famous famous club for the astronauts and aerospace guys, whatever. So, I mean, all my Dutch uncles, if you will, were all astronauts, Gemini, Mercury, Apollo astronauts. And that was back in the day when it used to be called the Docktown Strip. I did an interview with astronaut Gordon Cooper, who was one of the original Mercury astronauts, who was the fastest man alive and the last American to travel into space alone. And Gordon was talking about things that he'd seen out there in the late 60s and early 70s. You know, we're now finding out from the memoirs of people like Ben Rich and Kelly Johnson, and you know, some woman at the LA Times wrote a book with these old timer guys out there talking about basically U-2 fighters and stealth bombers and you know, surveillance and reconnaissance, what's known as SR. You know, the SR-71, the 72, the 73, the 74, you know, the fighter stuff. But the UFO stuff was really pretty interesting because a lot of the UFO stuff got moved in there, as far as I could tell. It got moved over from the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base early on, and nobody could really figure out what to do with it. It wasn't until, I think, about 87 or so, just to recount a little bit of the story, about 86 or 87 was when they actually then decided to actually hangar it and build a new facility for it over across the way at Papoose Lake, which is sort of the next valley over. And Area 51 is just a map classification that, you know, there's 49 and 52 and 13, and so the whole middle part of the state is basically a playground for the Air Force. Basically 89% of the state of Nevada is owned almost entirely by the federal government. And from Nellis Air Force Base in Vegas, basically the Air Force and the federal government owns everything up the middle of the state. You have to go around on highways 95 and 93 and then cut over on 375 because that's all the Nellis airfield. Literally, the federal government and the Air Force test field, if you will, is about 3 times the size of Switzerland. So to make a long story very brief, they had 9 captured flying saucers that they'd shot down using a combination of the HARP project and a device that they developed called the Thor's hammer. And there's been different